Hey, Vsauce, Yuval here, and right now I'm spying on my neighbors. But what good is spying really? I mean, it is human nature to want to know what your neighbors are up to, but when used in wartime, spying can be extremely effective.
Spying is a great way of collecting information secretly from enemies. It's a very important aspect of war and battles. One such example is the Civil War.
Yo, okay. You gotta get out.
What? No, I'm talking.
Elliot.
I'm talking right now. I'm talking!
Usually, intelligence received by the Union came from freed slaves who had reached the North. These slaves were known as black dispatches. But once both sides started utilizing spying techniques, it became much more necessary as well as diverse. Spies in the Civil War could remain hidden because of the cultural diversity of America, and it gave a neutral status to all people. In the so-called melting pot, one couldn't tell that a person was a spy by merely looking at them. This was fundamentally one of the greatest disguises used by spies. Methods of spying during the Civil War would be considered amateurish by today's standards because getting into and around the country was relatively easy due to lots of new transportation being invented and communication, such as the railroad and the telegraph. Spies also didn't have a hard time getting into secret meeting houses or private military facilities because borders were often not guarded. This way, many people could become spies, and one would not be required to have a great deal of training in order to snoop around on military and political affairs. Some people, like Elizabeth Van Lew, otherwise known as Crazy Bet, spied from her house for the Union. She relayed this information to imprisoned Union soldiers at the Libby prison in Richmond. She also helped many of these prisoners to escape, pointed out safe houses, and even managed to get a Union sympathizer appointed in the prison. She operated a spy ring. What is this? Hello? Kevin Wilson? Oh, hey. Wait. No, I'm sorry. What? You're calling to say that you wish that you had chosen Spies instead of the Battle of Antietam? I'm sorry, man. You really can't switch at this point. It's too late. That's alright. Alright, bye. I'll see you. I gotta get back to recording now. She operated a spy ring of 12 people, which consisted of Civil War clerks to even members of the Confederate Navy. She managed to appoint Mary Bowser, who was a freed slave working as a Civil War spy, as a member of Varina Davis, Jefferson Davis's wife, servant in the Confederate White House. General Robert E. Lee made sure to have the Union's newspapers delivered to him frequently so that he could predict the Union's troops' movement times. The Confederates also had a connection with the spy Rose O'Neal Greenhow, who was employed by Virginia Governor John Letcher. Greenhow was married to a powerful Northerner who had connections in many high places. She's also credited by Jefferson Davis to providing the battle strategy for the Battle of Bull Run. That way, the South won the battle using her intelligence. President Lincoln employed William Alvin Lloyd, perhaps one of the most famous spies in the Civil War and even throughout American history, who had a business in the South before the war started. Lincoln worked in the South and then reported to the Union his observations. Another very famous spy was Allan Pinkerton. Pinkerton was a barrel maker and sheriff who foiled the plot to assassinate Lincoln in 1861. He went on to found the National Detective Agency as well as the Secret Service. This consisted of Pinkerton's men posing as Confederate soldiers and then reporting back estimations of the numbers of Confederate soldiers. These overestimations on the spies' part fueled McClellan's hesitations in battle.
The prevalence of spies in the Civil War called for modern technology. The most prevalently used item in the Civil War was the hot air balloon. Spies would fly hot air balloons over 1,000 feet to be covered by clouds and spy down upon the enemies. The balloon named the Union was the first balloon designed for military use, and both the Confederates and the Union won many battles based solely upon the information gathered by air balloons and telegraphed back to headquarters. Speaking of the telegraph, it was the most used piece of equipment during the Civil War. Over 15,000 lines were dedicated solely to the transfer of military intelligence. In fact, in 1861, commercial telegraph lines were seized for military use. But what good is a telegraph if your enemies could steal the information? Because telegraph lines could be easily rerouted and messages could be stolen, almost all telegraphs were written in ciphers, which were usually 26 symbols that substituted the alphabet letters.
Action.
Now ciphers are cool, but what about spying that's 100% secretive? Photography was used during the Civil War to gain access to enemy encampments. You see, photographers would pose as people photographing soldiers who were excited about the new technology and then take a picture. Just like that. And then they would have details about the enemy. For example, you can notice weapons or information about the terrain of the battlefield.
In April 1861, after Virginia seceded from the Union, but before it joined the Confederates, the governor, John Letcher, decided to create a spy network in Washington, D.C. A famous Union spy was called Lafayette C. Baker. He was known to be a very brave man, but at the same time ruthless, because he rounded up many people who lived in Washington, D.C. who were considered traitors. These were people who had Southern sympathies. He was also the man who headed the manhunt for John Wilkes Booth, the person who assassinated Lincoln. Rose Neal Greenhow was a female spy who played an important role in winning the First Battle of Bull Run. In July 1861, Greenhow was friends of many powerful Northerners and realized that the Union was planning to attack. So she sent a young woman named Betty Duval to deliver her message to the Confederate officers stationed there. With this information, the rebel army was able to win a surprise victory. Rose O'Neal Greenhow was one of the first Confederate spies targeted by Allen Pinkerton. She was placed under surveillance and then arrested and was sent to Old Capitol Prison. She was released less than a year later because she's a woman, and that's not fair! I apologize for my outbursts, and I realized that what I said was out of place, but female spies actually did receive much less of a punishment than male spies did. None of the female spies were ever hung, but there were male spies that were hung for treason. Timothy Webster pretended to be a courier on the secret line and managed to gain the trust of Judah P. Benjamin, the Confederate Secretary of War. Benjamin sent Webster to deliver documents to secessionists in Baltimore, which, instead, Webster passed the notes on to Pinkerton. Webster was eventually arrested, tried as a spy, and then sentenced to death. Although Lincoln sent President Jefferson Davis a message threatening to hang captured Confederate spies if Webster was executed, the death sentence was carried out in late April 1862. Spies are extremely important in modern society, whether it's for collecting intelligence for warfare, or if we are just simply spying on our neighbors. In fact, how do you know you're not being spied on right now?
And as always,
Thanks for watching.